budgets. I suppose it's a case of they need to be careful, and there are a lot of things that have changed very radically in the last number of years, and particularly, say you take the Middle East now, how it has changed in the last 3-4 years alone. So we need to be careful as well, and it's something, and I suppose in what I said, it's about cooperation between member states as well. There's no point in saying a number of member states having capability in an area where there's duplication, when if there was a lot more cooperation. In fact, you probably could even, more careful planning between member states could be helpful.
Yeah, we even won the Nobel Prize for it. So, right. So no, but I think of course it's true. I think the two things to that. First, it's true that we are at peace, which makes it difficult to explain to many European publics why we should spend on military defense. That's one of the problems, and it goes back to the debate over strategic culture that we had earlier. What are strategic interests? What do we need? What's the use of military force? But at the same time, we had a peaceful run because someone else underwrote our security. And that's why the US turning away from pivoting towards Asia and spending less on defense could be such a game changer, because that security umbrella is no longer available under which the Europeans can make efforts on peace and enlargement. And I think the thinking is that you need both, and obviously I hope to God we don't have to use military force in territorial defense, but you should have the option to threaten or prevent that from happening if someone else can't do it for you.
So if we don't know, we're planning a secret.
The other issue, of course, is diplomacy, in the sense that if you have a conflict situation, if Europe is working in a coordinated way, then it might resolve a conflict far faster by having the capabilities as well. So there is diplomacy as well in that, so something to be mindful of.
Okay, and yes,
okay, Ian Bond from the Centre for European Reform. Going back to the EU security strategy, great American baseball player Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you may end up someplace else. We've got a 10-year-old map. We can't agree what it ought to look like now. So do we know where we're going? And perhaps a question specifically to Senator Burke. What does neutrality mean in a non-bloc world?
Sounds right.
Just to explain the Irish situation in relation to neutrality, we have what we call a triple lock system in Ireland. Before Irish troops can be deployed anywhere, one, it must be a UN mandate. Two, it must be approved by the Irish government, and three, it must be approved by the Irish Parliament. So it's known as a triple lock system. And any deployment of troops that we've had have been to peacekeeping role rather than in any conflict role. So it's quite restrictive in relation to, and that's why I don't feel that it's right for me to talk about what Europe should be doing. And that's why I quoted from the academics rather than quoting from any Irish authority on this matter. But that's basically how we have worked in up to this over the last 50 years with the UN. But we have also been very proactive in working with other European states. For instance, we went into Chad in 2008, and it was an Irish commander that headed up that peacekeeping role in Chad on the Sudanese border, and I don't see any reason why that can't continue on. But in that case, it was a UN mandate where the UN could not come up with the troops to go into Chad. The European Union came up with the troops, and Ireland became involved. And I think that's the role that Ireland will continue to play. And we're back into Lebanon now, again in the peacekeeping role as well. So I think we will continue to do that. And there are other member states who work like that as well. I think as a small country, it has been beneficial for other countries, for I'll give you a simple example. I remember being in, and I hope people won't take offence in what I'm saying in this now, because it was one of the things said within committee in the European Parliament when I was there, when we went into Chad, and there was a report back into a committee within Chad. And one of the things said was that the Irish troops in there in 6 months had achieved more than in the previous 20 years, because they approached it in a totally different way, and they weren't seen as coming from in a conflict role. They were coming in kind of as a community building role, and I think it's a different type of approach, and so I think we have a part to play, and I think that we will continue to play that part insofar as we can.
On the strategy, it's true that the document's 10 years old. It had a 5-year checkup in 2008. It was affirmed, so I mean, I guess there's still general agreement, but I agree that it's time. I mean, it's time to maybe not necessarily update the whole document, but to have a discussion over what Europe's global aims should be, and perhaps going broader than just security, but spanning foreign policy as well. I mean, there is an initiative by four foreign ministries that have passed the respective think tanks on drawing up a global strategy document to see whether there's appetite within the EU to be engaged with that project. I'm not sure whether it's finding many takers, which is a shame. But I mean, I think it shows that member states are quite aware of the need for strategic reflection on Europe and where we actually end up or might want to go. I think it would. I mean, personally, I think it would make a lot of sense to do it. It would make a lot of sense to institute some sort of strategic debate to have, just to make sure we're updating our goals and our instruments, but also in terms of a socialization function in getting countries to reflect collectively on what Europe's aims and ambitions are, just the way other countries, for example the US does. Unfortunately, I take your point.
Any final questions? In which case, I'd like to thank both of our speakers, Eva Gross from the European Institute of Security Studies and Senator Colin Burt, member of the Irish Parliament. Many thanks for a very interesting debate on both the future and the structure of the European security and defence policy. And also many thanks to you for some very interesting and incisive questions. Many thanks.
But
and a very warm welcome to you all. Lovely to see so many of you staying on for the second of this afternoon's debates, where we focus on the European Union's relationship with its neighbours. Now, the European Neighbourhood Policy, or the ENP as it's known, is the EU's main framework for engaging with the countries which share its borders both to the east and to the south. Now, many of these countries either seek to one day become members of the EU itself or wish to foster better economic ties with the EU. Now, at its core, the ENP claims to promote human rights, democracy and socio-economic development. The European External Action Service is in charge of the ENP and now flags a more for more policy, which focuses on forging stronger partnerships with neighbours which make progress in these core areas. On the flip side, the EEAS is also pushing for something akin to a naming and shaming policy for those that don't. Now, the way in which the ENP operates is through the so-called association agreements, just some background for those who don't know, and concluded with those neighbours that the EU believes are committed to political, economic, trade or human rights reforms within their own country. In exchange, the country concerned can be offered tariff-free access to some or all EU markets. Now, one country awaiting the conclusion of just such an agreement is Ukraine. It's been waiting since the end of 2011, to be precise, but various sticking points still exist, namely in the form of Yulia Tymoshenko, the former Prime Minister jailed in 2011 over her handling of a major gas deal with Russia. Now, prosecutors claim it saddled Ukraine with crippling gas charges, but many in Europe and Washington believe Tymoshenko is the victim of selective prosecution. However, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister on his very recent trip to London said that there is no plan to release Ms. Tymoshenko before the EU deadline at the end of the month. Now, this session will discuss the European neighbourhood policy from a number of different angles and perspectives, including from the perspective of the EU's neighbours themselves, asking to what degree can and should the EU involve itself in the internal judicial processes of its neighbours. Should the EU engage in more trade with its neighbours or simply more aid? How can the EU neighbourhood policy be made to really serve the EU's trade and security interests best? And finally, what prospects and challenges lie ahead for further EU enlargement? Well, joining me on